Edible Green Mountains, which is a new food publication in the state. So Deborah's going to be here with me on Tuesday, or I'm sorry, on Saturday, and that show will play next Tuesday. And then the show that we have tonight will be airing actually a week from this coming Saturday. So if you miss anything today, don't worry about it. You'll be able to catch it a week from Saturday. And also want to remind everyone that you can always go to our website at www.dinnerhour.org and tune in to see what our shows have been. And you can actually download all of our shows from right there. Also, if you're ever in the Bellows Falls area on Thursdays, you can tune in to us on WOOL, that's 100.1 FM, another community radio station that is kind enough to carry the dinner hour. So that's Thursdays from 5 to 6. If you have any questions during the show, we want to give people an opportunity to give us a call in here at 496-4951, so you might just want to jot that down. And I wanted to let everyone know that WMRW is generously supported by the Jameson Insurance Agency. If you like local radio, you'll love local insurance. They can be reached by dialing 496-2080. And also, as always, I want to remind everyone that the following program represents the opinions of the participants and producers of this program. It does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of WMRW or its license holder Rootswork. Well, I think it's about time we get started here. As always, we need to start the show with a little Fight with the iPod. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and once again, welcome to, sorry about that, microphone was a little low. Welcome to the dinner hour here on WMRW LP1 95.1 FM. Just a couple of announcements before we get started with today's show. Wanted to update everyone on the Super Bowl, and this isn't the other Super Bowl. This is like the real, authentic, live Super Bowl right here in the Mad River Valley. It's going to be taking place on the 27th of January. Let me just spell super for you. It's S-O-U-P-E-R. So that might give you a little hint as to what we will be serving. We're actually going to be having hot soups from 9 different local chefs will be providing soups. Chefs like Jason Golisano at the Green Cup, Michael Flanagan from Michael's Good to Go, Tom Gorman from the Millbrook, and several other chefs are going to be contributing soups. So that's January 27th, 5 to 8. And the reason why I really wanted to tell people about it today is tickets are going fast. We're over half sold out. There definitely is a limit to how many people we can have in the Round Barn. So if you would like to get tickets, I recommend you do it quickly. You can get tickets by going to our website at vermontlocalvore.org and ordering them online, or you can go to the Chamber of Commerce or Sweet Pea Natural Food Store to get tickets. By the way, the tickets are $15 for adults and $10 for kids under 12. 12 and under. And if we have any available, they will be $5 more at the door. So that's even more reason to get them in advance. But I honestly think we're going to sell out. If you're not able to get tickets any of those means, you can always give me a call, Robin McDermott, at 496-3567. And I also wanted to let everyone know that on the 26th, so that's Saturday, there's going to be a meeting of the Kingsbury Community Farm. It's a community meeting. The purpose is to kind of formalize an organizational structure so that we can move forward and do something about this farm on a community-wide basis. We'll also be looking at the vision, mission, and some guidelines for what this farm will be. So that is the 26th, Saturday the 26th from 3 to 6, and that's going to be right at the Kingsbury Community Farm. Just wanted to make one other note here, and kind of it's a great way to introduce my guest today, because right before I was leaving, my husband handed me a story. He goes, well, there you go. And the title is FDA Gives Blessing to Food from Cloned Animals. So the U.S. government ruled on Tuesday that meat and milk from cloned animals and their offspring is as safe as other food, but pressed firms that produce clones to hold off on bringing them into the food supply. So anyway, there you have it, folks. Our government has decided that we can now eat meat and milk from cloned animals. Who knows what that means down the road for us, if there are ever any ramifications. And I'm sure that they won't want it to be labeled because they wouldn't want to confuse us stupid consumers. So just something to keep in mind. And so, that's kind of a health issue. And so I thought, everyone in the beginning of the year starts thinking about health and, how am I going to be healthy and lose weight this year? So I thought it would be great to have an expert in that area. And so I invited Dr. Tim Wargo on the show. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing great.
Oh, that's great. You sound great, Tim. Excellent. What a good radio voice you have.
Yeah, I like playing around with radio.
Oh, I didn't know that. So you're...
I'm a ham.
Oh, you are? Really? You're a ham operator?
A closet ham. Actually,
okay.
one of my sons has been a DJ and at WUVM, so he got his debut there. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, so for those of you who don't know who Dr. Tim Wargo is, why don't we tell them who you are and where your practice is?
Well, I'm currently in Waitsfield, having come back to the Valley 2 years ago, in December, actually, from Dover, New Hampshire. And I'm doing a model that I've developed over the last 20 or 30 years that I labeled as integrative medicine. And it's not really my label. It's, some other people have explored it, like James Gordon and others. But it's basically a model that tries to look at the whole person in a family practice setting. So I try to look at all the parts of the human person and how they might impact on their health. Mm-hmm. So I look at the physical, emotional, spiritual, psychic, all those aspects and how they might impact. And in my studies over the years, I've tried to address all those issues in terms of my own health and understanding and exploring it, and then reading about and talking to other people.
And I'll tell you what, for 95 years old, you look great. So you've been doing something right.
Well, I always planned to live to be 105, so I've only got 10 more years to go.
I'm only kidding. And by the way, we're going to put this on Channel 44, so you'll be able to see Dr. Tim Wargo on there.
All right.
Okay. I mean, my mindset is that you're sick, you go to a doctor, and then he gives you a pill or something, and you leave, and then you don't see him again until you're sick, him or her. So that sounds a little different than what you're doing there.
Yeah, what I try to do is encourage people to look at certainly what might be labeled as the conventional way of doing things. And you can get a physical, you can get labs, you can get x-rays, you can get a physical every so often, and that's important. But during that process, what I try to hook people on is saying, okay, you've done all of these things, they seem to be helping or they're not helping, and have you ever considered X, Y, or Z? And X, Y, and Z might be, first of all, what is your diet like? Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of time looking at nutrition and how that might impact on how they're feeling, how they're functioning, if they have certain goals in mind in terms of exercise, how that might interfere with it or make it more easy to do. Mm-hmm. If they have specific health issues, then it's even more important to try to impact and to hook them on looking at things differently. So if they've come into the office the third or fourth time with a sinus infection and they're wondering why, and they always get antibiotics, maybe there is another way we can look at how to prevent that from happening, and maybe there's something in their environment, including their diet, that might be impacting. So I try to look at all of those over a period of time. Obviously, some people are in there to say, well, look, I've got to be at the office in 5 minutes, and I have to get back to work. So what can you give me for a quick fix? Which is fine, and I'm okay with that. But again, if they're coming back again and again, then something needs to change. And so there's all kinds of resources out there. There's certainly diet, there's exercise that I think people understand very well. But there's also things like learning how to breathe, learning how to sit in your chair, how to move around, how to prevent injuries by riding differently in your car or sitting in front of your computer. There's all kinds of people around that are willing to help you out, like acupuncturist, massage therapist, or reflexologist, or naturopaths, or chiropractors, or whatever, who might be able to help you to do things differently. And so what I do then is look at how those pieces might fit into a person's model of taking care of themselves, and how they might integrate that with a conventional approach, either drugs or whatever they might be doing for themselves currently. And so I invite them to bring in that information. Who have they been to? What have they tried? What works? What doesn't work? Why doesn't it work? What's safe? What's not effective? What's too expensive? And look at the whole bag and not just one or two things, which is very challenging and very exciting for me. It takes at least 50% more of my time to take care of somebody than it would just in a conventional model. But it's really exciting when somebody comes in and says, you know what, when I first heard you talk, I thought it was all nonsense. I thought it was impossible. But you know what? I feel better. I never felt better in my life. I have a totally different way of looking at life. Thank you very much. And that really makes me feel good.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I always thought, like, if I wanted to go to an acupuncturist or something like that, I kind of had to, like, seek them out on my own and decide if they were the right person. But it sounds to me like you're kind of the guy that would direct someone in the right direction.
Certainly can do that. In some ways, I'm a coordinator or a quarterback, but in other ways, I can provide people with information. And what's interesting, and this is true of any modality, you can have two surgeons who stand side by side, equally good qualifications, and they do their stuff really well. But Joe Brown doesn't like Dr. A, or didn't have a good result, whatever that might mean. Whereas Dr. Yagovich did him much better. And that says nothing about their technical ability to do things, but the fact of the matter is personalities fit different kinds of people. So what I try to do is to see who might have a particular style or way of doing something that might fit better with one person versus another. And so that's where also I can be helpful. It's no criticism of either one of those choices, but it's just a fact that some people do better in a certain office setting or approach or style than somebody else.
Wow. So in addition to having obviously a network of specialist physicians, like, neurologists and osteopaths and all that, or, orthopedic guys, you also have this network of massage therapists.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so my network now extends from Maine to Massachusetts to New York. I know some people in California, Canada, so you can run the gamut. Of course, the internet certainly helps, but I have people coming to me from different states who have had different experiences and explored different options and want to know where to go next. I don't consider myself an expert. I'm just a beginner in all of this, but what I really like is a challenge in helping people to sort through things. And if we get stuck, well, maybe there's another way of looking at it. So bring in another person. Yeah. It's an exciting time to be practicing medicine.
Wow, that is. I mean, it's a lot different than what I'm used to. But I know I've gone into your office once because I did have a cold. I needed somebody to tell me I wasn't dying, because it was one of those colds that wouldn't end. And I was really impressed because you were on the phone talking to someone about, they should be drinking water and basically going over nutritional stuff. And I think that you were on there the whole time that I was in the office. And I thought, wow, that's not like what most doctors I know do.
Well, I try to look at the simple things first. And I have a basic list that I try to go over with everybody. I don't always succeed in doing that, again, because of time factors. But the basic list, I try to look at what are they eating and what are they doing for exercise and what is their environment like. And so I try to get a sense for that. In terms of the eating list, there are a lot of things that can really help. Simple things like colds and stomach aches and chronic headaches and muscle aches and pains and back pain that really are vital for everybody to be aware of. There's actually a whole book written, for example, on the benefits of water. And there was an interesting story. I don't remember all the details, but it was either in the Korean War theater or Vietnam. There was a physician who was captured, and he was slated to be killed. And he begged for mercy and said, I'm a physician. I can help you out. Well, he didn't really have anything to work with. But what he did have was he encouraged everybody to drink more water. And 50% of the people got better.
Wow.
So simple things as that. I mean, here in the wintertime, it's really vital to be aware of how much dehydrated we get. And my wife constantly reminds me of this myself. And I'm sure she may be out there listening, but I can thank her for changing this notion in my own head. Because when I drink more water, I have fewer headaches, less aches and pains. I have more energy. I can think better and clearer. And my whole body tends to respond to stress and illnesses much more effectively because I'm flushing through things. I'm allowing those enzymes and hormones to work better because my heart doesn't have to work as hard and my kidneys are working better. So it does a lot. However, that being said, the source of water is very important. And a lot of us are into this substance right here in front of me called bottled water, which, can be great. But unfortunately, a lot of bottled water sources, for example, are too high in acid. They have a low pH.
Really?
So you have to be careful of your sources of water. Probably the ideal source is to have a spring that has a lot of minerals and stuff in it. But you have to be careful, obviously, for toxins getting in there and stuff. But if assuming that you're monitoring your well source, that's probably one of the best sources because it does have the minerals and often the right acid content. And so just being aware of that can help the body deal with things like going on an airplane ride and getting dehydrated from the low humidity and then being more vulnerable to whatever's floating around.
Oh, so that's why I get a cold every time I get on a plane.
Yeah.
So it's not just the person next to me who's sniffling, but I might actually be able to ward off that cold by drinking more water.
Certainly help. I mean, there are other things that you can certainly do as well, but I think hydration is a big part of staying healthy and the right kind of fluids. So I tell everybody to take their body weight, divide it by 2. That's the number of ounces that ideally you should be drinking every day.
Okay, wow. So if you're 150 pounds, you should be drinking 75 ounces of water a day.
That's correct.
Oh, that's an easy rule of thumb to remember.
If you're out exercising, and particularly in the hot weather or even the cold weather like a day like this, then you need somewhere around 200 to 300 cc's of fluid every 20 minutes that you're out there vigorously engaged in activities. But for the most part, that formula works for an average person. If you're sitting in a hot office where the heat's up around 72, then you may need more. If you're out in extreme weather, then you might need more.
Now, does I'm drinking a little tea here. Does that count? Coffee count?
Well, that's an interesting question because I think that the general recommendations now are that somewhere around a cup of coffee a day is probably okay for you because it does have benefits. It has antioxidants in it. It helps people to feel good and to pick up their energy. The downside of it is that an excessive amount of caffeine can actually make you dehydrated because it's a diuretic and makes you pee more. Same thing with tea. People that have headaches might also be more sensitive to it. People that have muscle spasm, fibromyalgia, or chronic pain might get worse because it tends to generate more tension and stress on the muscles. So you have to be careful, again, how much you're taking in. And as commonly said, more is not necessarily better, and a moderate amount of anything. I mean, you can drink too much water, for example, but some people just can't tolerate the effects of caffeine.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Wow.
they really should look for another source of water
Yep. Okay.
or
So,
hydration.
wow. Okay. So that's, that's really interesting because you hear about, you should drink more water, but nobody's really explained to me what it does, how it pushes the toxins out. So that's great. Okay. So I'm going to start drinking more water.
Yeah. And you'll
That's
stay
an
healthier.
easy thing. Yeah. So, what are some other things that people should be thinking about in terms of, nutrition, people wanting to lose weight in the beginning of the year?
I think it's a personal question because everybody is different. And one of the difficulties, I think, within the whole field of nutrition is it's not an exact science in the sense that we can say, this is what you need. And it's good for everybody because it's not true. Everybody has different genetic material and likes and dislikes, and also their energy expenditure might be different. So, for example, a person who is trying to be a triathlete or a super athlete is going to have different needs than somebody who's more sedentary. So you have to look at what your personal stuff is, and that's hard to sort out. And certain family habits get sort of ingrained, and there's also the whole notion of comfort and feeling good. So it's hard. It's really hard to come down with a definite one-person formula. This time of year, it's also very difficult because I kind of think of ourselves as like bears. We like to hibernate. And we like to store up the fat and feel good and feel warm. So a lot of the foods that are around this time of year, interestingly, do just that. They help us to store fat. But they also have a downside because they're often high in sugar or high in fat. And so those kinds of foods have their own problem. We also, in this part of the country, don't have access to some of the better foods like green vegetables and fresh foods.
Right.
And fresh whole grains and that sort of thing, which actually I think are better for us in the long run than a lot of the other foods. Also, food preparation comes into play. So it's clear to me that many of the problems that are associated with the kinds of foods that we're choosing are also multiplied because we're frying things. We're deep frying. We're exposing things to high heats, which tends to degrade the food products of their natural qualities. So it gets very complicated in trying to look at all that. But some generalizations that I found to be true. And I think that this is confirmed by a lot of the recent research that's coming out on something that's become very popular called metabolic syndrome. And you can certainly Google that and look up on the internet what that's all about. But in listening to the experts, it's very apparent to me that one of the things that we seem to be missing is the impact of sugar in our diet. So yes, fat's important. Yes, getting vitamins and minerals are important. And the way we're preparing foods is important for things like heart disease and diabetes. But I think what's becoming more important, more and more apparent to me as well as the experts, is the kinds of sugar we're getting in our diets. So often, unfortunately, many of the sugars that are on our shelves are in the category of what I call simple sugars. So that includes obviously things like cake, cookie, ice cream, the sweets. But it also includes things like white flour, which is found in pasta and pizza and bread. And so what do I mean by simple carbohydrates? It's basically a sugar that doesn't have anything else associated with it. So it doesn't have any fiber. It often doesn't have any other vitamins, minerals, or trace elements. So we're just getting sugar. And if you look at what's on the shelves, most of the foods are in that category. They're very cheap. They're easy to manufacture. Somebody who has a low budget for food can readily understand how to get that. They make you feel good. You get a rush of sugar. And so what happens in the person who is developing metabolic syndrome is that puts a huge stress on the system, on the organs, and eventually they head down the pathway that leads either to heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, strokes, a whole bunch of things. And that's important to know. But I think what is also very apparent is that whole process, that whole stuff that's happening in the metabolism of the person happens to everybody who ingest a lot of sugar, simple sugars. And it's actually been shown that the sugar itself is pro-inflammatory. So inflammation in the body increases the more sugar we have in our diet. That's simple. So the solution then is to eat more complex carbohydrates. And it's no surprise that, you know, grandmother said the same thing. Eat more vegetables, eat more fruit, eat more grains. So simply by converting from simple to complex carbohydrates changes a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not saying don't ever eat the other stuff, but if you look at your diet and you're constantly eating simple sugars, you're going to have problems. The first thing you're going to have is more pain. You're going to have damage to organs, joints. It's more likely that you're going to have cancer and heart disease and diabetes, all the things that we talk about. So I think it's an important factor that we have to really look at. And I actually asked a very well-known endocrinologist at the University of Vermont, so why aren't we doing something about this? And he says, everything you're saying is true, that we need to look at this, but in order to change that, we have to have a radical change in our whole industry of food. Because obviously everybody's making money on this, on what we eat.
Right.
And to change that is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of loss probably initially. Financially, by pulling stuff off the shelf that is not healthy for us.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because I remember a few years ago when low fat was the big thing, and you can, you know, like you could get like Entenmann's had low fat Danish, but if you looked at it, it was just loaded, like they made up with the fat with sugar.
Exactly.
You know, yet people were like eating it almost like they felt like it was taking calories away from them.
Right.
Eating it.
Right.
You know, that's what they lead you to believe, and it is a whole industry. That's telling us that it's good to eat that stuff.
Well, it feels good, and you know it's okay to feel good, but what I find is that when people come in and complain of chronic pain or chronic whatever, and you talk about getting the sugar out, well, I don't really eat that much sugar, and so they kind of go along with you for a while, and then eventually they'll come back and say, you know what, you're right, I've tried that, and I feel better, and my life is different, and they have more energy. The other thing that's happening is because they're getting just the sugar, they're not getting fiber, and they're not getting vitamins, minerals, and trace elements, which are often stripped away from these products because it's easier to make them. So when you start adding the other foods, their body's repairing itself more easily. They're not getting injured as quickly. They have more stamina. They're able to think better. Because the impact of this inflammation affects all of the organs, including the brain, the nervous system, the immune system. So everything just works better when you eat right.
Wow.
So what I encourage people to do is get fresh fruits and vegetables as much as possible, which is hard to do this time of year.
It is. Well, I mean, you know, they're available, and, you know, I am a localvore, so I like eating local food, but, hey, I have family send oranges up from Florida, and they're fantastic. But you can get local apples and local carrots and beets and potatoes. So,
and some of your restaurants, I think, are now looking at this whole process. And I know Tom and Joan certainly do have good fresh foods on their tables. So, obviously, it's more expensive to go to a restaurant, but you know that's another way of seeing what people do with fresh, good foods.
Right.
And give you some alternatives.
The pasta is interesting because you said pasta is made with white flour and therefore has a lot of simple sugars in it. You know, that's surprising to me because, you know, you hear marathoners, they bulk up on pasta before a race. Now, I'm not running races, so maybe it doesn't apply to me. But are there other foods like that that are kind of a surprise? You know, obviously candy and cakes and stuff like that.
A lot of your boxed cereals.
Boxed cereals.
A lot of your boxed cereals are if you look at what I want to encourage people to do is to look at labels. And if you've got 25 grams of carbohydrates, then you should see 4 or 5 grams of fiber. So it's the fiber that's slowing down how quickly the sugar is coming into your body. It just takes more time to digest. So you can buy whole wheat pasta. You can buy whole grain breads. And it's the fiber then that offsets the carbohydrates. If you're a marathon runner and you need those quick bursts of calories right before a race, that's appropriate because you're burning it off quickly and your metabolism is geared up to burn it off. But if you're not doing that, what's going to happen is that sugar is going to be sucked up by the liver and you're going to convert it to fat.
Huh, wow.
And so that's the downside of that, in addition to all the other inflammatory stuff that's going on. So, you have to have that balance between intake of calories and expenditure of the energy, but also the other nutrients that are not present. And it's the fiber that does make the difference. So here again, if you're eating white rice, that's different than wild rice. If you're eating instant oatmeal instead of the Irish or Scottish oatmeal or the steel cut oatmeal, there's a difference of fiber in that. It's obviously very convenient to have the instant oatmeal quickly cooked, but you're not getting the same benefits. In fact, I always laugh at the commercials that say, well, eat oatmeal to lower your cholesterol. Well, that's great, but the fact of the matter is if you took an individual and followed them week by week, every day they could have a variation of 10 or 15% in their cholesterol. So that's always questioned. But the important point is if they're eating instant oatmeal, that is not as beneficial to their whole health. It might lower their cholesterol, but it's doing other things. So we have to look at all of these things in perspective.
Yep.
So, and it's interesting that when you look at cultures like the Italians, they eat a lot of pasta, but they also have other things to balance. They have a lot of oils. They use obviously olive oil, but they also use borage oil. They eat a lot of fresh fishes and things that are high in omega-3s. So in addition to converting from the simple sugars to the complex, I encourage the addition of omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. So that helps to offset the balance. It's also interesting, there was a study, there's a book, actually a magazine called Ode, O-D-E, and I look at it as sort of the international thinkers magazine. It has all kinds of great articles, and
not just medicine, just
no, it's just general topics of conversation. And a year or so ago, they had an article looking at this book of this person who went around the world and took pictures of everybody who ate various foods on the planet. And so they asked them to pile up all the foods that they would eat in a week. And it's really fascinating. The people who lived in third world countries actually ate better than we do, because most of their table was filled with whole grains and fresh vegetables and fresh meats. And the more money that people had, the more money they spent on processed food and the simple sugars. Yep. Now, obviously, there's a distribution problem in the third world countries, but when you look at what they're eating, they're actually eating healthier.
Wow, that's amazing. I have that book. It's called Hungry Planet.
Yeah.
And, and it's what's scary is that you'll see a family like in Ethiopia with all these bags of rice and then maybe some Twinkies in the middle. So unfortunately, it's getting in there. And I'm sure you've read about the problem with heart disease in India because their diet's changing. And
well, look at the heart disease we're seeing in our teenage group now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really scary.
Yeah, very scary. Wow.
So we have a national, if not an international, crisis of nutrition, and right here in this country we have an obese population, and the frustrating thing as a physician is we have that crisis, but the insurances are not willing to pay for a patient if I have on their problem list obesity, and if I have on their charges for the day obesity. It's not recognized as a problem by the insurance companies. So
they want them to get really sick.
I guess so.
Yeah. Wow. Huh, how about that? Well, Tim, I said we were going to take a break at 5:30, but we're on a roll, so let's keep going.
Do it.
Yeah. So, kind of as a segue to what we're going to talk about next, what is your thought about this cloned animal thing?
Well, I don't know a lot
I just
about
kind of sprung it on you,
what cloned animals mean in terms of nutrition. I think cloned vegetables certainly. Not when I say cloned, but where they're altered genetically.
Genetically
that might have a bigger impact that I would be more concerned about. But cloned animals, certainly, I think if the animal itself is healthy and the tissues are healthy and it's been fed food that's healthy, then chances are it's probably not going to impact on us. What I would be more concerned about is genetically altered
Yep.
material, or material that's been animals that have been exposed to antibiotics or hormones.
Which is just about any meat that you can get in the grocery store.
And it's really fascinating. You know, people say, well, should I eat meat? Well, when you look at the omega-3 content of foods, you know, and just briefly, omega-3s are basically an antioxidant that's in the food, and it's there because of the way the animal has been fed. So it gets it from its environment, either naturally or artificially. And so the animal generates these substances within its tissues. And a wild animal is more apt to have higher omega-3s. A farm-raised animal that's fed grain is more likely to have omega-6s. Now, the difference between...
That's twice as good as a 3.
Well, yes, number-wise. But in terms of your health, the omega-3s are actually more anti-inflammatory than the omega-6s. So you want a diet that is high in omega-3s. And typically, or what I'll recommend to people is add flaxseed or fish oil or borage oil for your omega-3s. Farm-raised fish is higher in omega-6s. So grass-fed beef is higher in omega-3s. So one can then assume from this that a grass-fed animal is better for you than a farm-raised fish, even though one's beef and the other's fish. So it's not just the kind of animal; it's how it's raised.
Wow, that's interesting, because people would go to the grocery store and buy farm-raised salmon and think that they were having a high, very healthy, high omega-3 fatty acid dinner. Wow,
right.
Interesting.
So, I mean, I think that some of the people have attempted to deal with this by feeding the animal more organic food, which can certainly help. And it's hard to understand all of the factors in why there's some more omega-6s in an animal that's caged, that's fed grain, that is stressed in a different way than an animal that's running out free and out among the predators. But the fact of the matter is, there is more omega-3s in that free-range chicken than there is in the fish who's in a cage.
Wow.
So that has to be looked at, and I can tell the difference. I like the taste of wild salmon, and it has a much different flavor. The oil consistency is different. The fatty content is different. So I can taste the difference. But in terms of your health, omega-3s are better for you than omega-6s. So this can offset the other factors that are leading to the inflammation in your body. If you're eating some sugar, obviously, you can certainly balance that with omega-3s, but there is a point of no return. If you're eating candy all day and also eating wild salmon, it probably isn't going to help a lot. But the more we can expose ourselves to these healthier foods, which often turn out to be wild animals or organically grown animals, in my opinion, that's my opinion, I think those things are better for you. And I feel better. I have more energy. I don't have as much pain. So it makes sense to me to do those things.
Wow. So what about along those same lines? I mean, you're talking about beef, and beef has fat in it, so people would think that it's bad. And, same thing like with butter. I mean, the whole thing, years ago when they told you, butter isn't good for you, you need to eat margarine. Now, margarine's not good for you, you need to eat butter. And some people like my mom just said, she stopped at the margarine stage and she said, I can't keep following this. I'm just going with margarine. That's what they told me. So is that, how do butter, how do natural dairy products like that work?
I think what's been evident is the whole issue of trans fatty acids. And a lot of those are coming from manufactured fats and oils. So your margarines basically have that issue. And attached to that issue and concern is, what is it doing for cancer? What is it doing for neurologic diseases? So that has to be looked at. And natural butter doesn't have that. What it does have is more cholesterol. So what you're looking at is the balance between the impact of cholesterol versus these other fats, and the fats can also have an impact on heart disease. The other fats, the trans fatty acids, can also have an impact on heart disease as well. What I think is interesting about the whole cholesterol question is that I think that there are certainly a group of people on this planet who have high cholesterol and have a lot of heart disease associated with it. But the fact of the matter is there are people running around who have high cholesterol who don't have heart disease. There are also people who have low cholesterol who do have heart disease. So if we had one answer, cholesterol causes heart disease, then we would be great. It would be wonderful. But we don't have that answer. And I think what's happening in the nutritional field is, again, the impact of inflammation in the body. And so cholesterol by itself is not dangerous. It does not do damage unless it's inflammatory cholesterol. And so there's a whole bunch of research that's going on about, what causes cholesterol to be inflammatory, and that's good research. But the fact of the matter is cholesterol will not attach to the arteries unless the arteries are damaged. So what we need to look at is what is causing the damage. And there's a whole bunch of theories about that. One of the theories is that inflammation causes that damage. Sugar has an impact on that. So reducing sugar can decrease the inflammation, therefore the attachment of the cholesterol. Cholesterol is just a patch. It's an innocent bystander. Certainly if you have extremely high cholesterol, that can cause damage in itself, because particularly if it's inflamed, it can cause damage. But if it's not inflamed, then we need to look at the other issues that are impacting on those arteries, which then affects circulation to the brain, the organs, the nerves, the immune system, and everything. So it's interesting when you look at the statin drugs, which are used for cholesterol. It's very apparent that the reason they work is because they're anti-inflammatory, in addition to lowering cholesterol. So there's a whole argument out there about which variety of statins are better than others, and in part, I think, because of this whole issue of inflammation. So what we need to find is something that's inexpensive, not dangerous, doesn't have any side effects, that's anti-inflammatory, that's better than the statins. And I think that's where we're going to go. And I've said for at least 10 years that I think cholesterol is going to become a minor player in all of this. And what we're really going to look at is what is causing the inflammation. And so I stress that to people, and certainly I don't say don't worry about cholesterol, but for heaven's sake, don't ignore the other factors. And so there are any number of things that can be done to reduce inflammation. The diet certainly comes to mind. And
is there a test for inflammation? I mean, cholesterol is an easy thing for them to test.
That's where the rubber meets the road. We have things like CRP and Cedrate and different kinds of cholesterol, but we don't have, and homocysteine, but we don't have a reliable test that measures inflammation in the body. It's just not there. There's a whole bunch of research stuff out there looking at various factors, and I can certainly rattle them off, but they are not really readily available to the common lay person who is in there looking for a lab test that's not going to cost an arm and a leg. So the best that I can do is to measure some of these indicators and get some ballpark figures, and then really encourage people to look at the things they can control. So the diet is one. Their mental attitude is certainly important. Their exercise is important. And I think those are things that we can work with. If it's appropriate, then I'll use medication. But there is a downside to medication. Number one, it's very expensive. There are a number of people who have side effects that they complain of, and they may seem minor to some people, but I've seen people, lives change by getting off medication and using other things. That's not to say that sometimes we have to put up with side effects in order to feel better and to live longer. But if there is a better way, then I try to find it.
Wow. So, you kind of started talking about the omega-3s, and, that got me thinking about supplements, vitamins and stuff like that. And what do you advise people on vitamins?
I used to think that supplements were really a waste of money.
Mhm.
And I think that in some cases they are a waste of money, particularly anything that's manufactured in a laboratory that doesn't have a good reputation, that doesn't stand by their product, that isn't looking at the potential toxins like mercury or something. I think those are really suspect. And unfortunately, some of the cheaper varieties are really not beneficial for people. So I tell people that there's 5 things in addition to the water. So water's one.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is a multivitamin. So I encourage people to look at a whole food source of vitamins. And I'm not going to mention brand names here, but there are some really good quality brand names. And in fact, one of them's several of them are distributed here in Vermont. And they're based on whole foods.
Mm-hmm.
One is just dehydrated fruits and vegetables. So there's nothing else added. It's not coming out of a lab. It's not going to, it's not going to be something that the body's going to have trouble recognizing. And I think what's happening with this whole industry is it's become suspect because there's a lot of stuff out there that's just crap, and it's not doing anybody any good.
Well, yeah, I mean, you hear about those studies where they test the water, in
it's just going into the toilet.
It's going right into the toilet.
But things that are in their natural state are much more readily available and absorbed. And so I look at a good multivitamin that does that. And the problem
and you think
is
everyone should be taking that?
I think so, because particularly this time of year, we just can't get all the fruits and vegetables that we need. And it's been estimated by some that whereas 20 years ago you could get all the fruits and vegetables, all the nutrients you need from 5 pounds of fruits and vegetables, it's now 15 pounds of fruits and vegetables.
Oh, wow.
So
A day?
a day. So that's an impossible task.
Yes,
so
that is.
I really think as part of my food budget, I have a multivitamin, and I try to rotate among several different ones to try them out and make sure that they're okay for my clients. But they do make a difference. They're high in antioxidants. They're high in trace elements, and those are the kinds of things that the body depends on to repair itself and stay healthy. So that's the second category. The third category is a good source of calcium and magnesium and vitamin D. And so I've been assaying vitamin D levels for the last year and a half in my practice, and I'm finding there's a lot of people that are low in vitamin D. And vitamin D is important not just for bone health, but also muscle, brain, immune system, your energy state. Those are all impacted by low vitamin D levels. And the only there are several sources for that in our environment. Mr. Sun is one of them, but unfortunately we don't get enough.
Right.
Fish oil is another source. You can get a small amount from dairy products, but unfortunately the way milk has been basically manipulated, it's not a reliable source. It's not stable in the current form of milk that we're eating. It is in raw milk, but not in homogenized milk. So in fact, I had one client who was 29 years old, drank 3 gallons of milk a week, and his level of vitamin D was less than 6.
Wow.
And I start treating it at 29.
Wow.
So,
Holy smokes.
So we really need to supplement that. And there's a number of good sources for that, and along with calcium and magnesium. And so those 3 are going to help the brain, the muscles, the heart. They're going to help you to relax, help you to sleep. Very vital and very simple.
And are those 3 different pills that you have to take, or is
those
there...
are 3 different pills. Well, sometimes you can get a good vitamin D along with calcium and magnesium, but it's hard to find. And then your omega-3s in the form of flaxseed and fish oil. And then the last one helps the absorption of all the other 4, and that's acidophilus.
I remember we had that discussion about acidophilus.
Yeah.
What is acidophilus?
Acidophilus is those little squiggly bacteria that you find in yogurt. And there's actually, over 30 different varieties or strains. And so I encourage people to take a supplement of that because you really can't get it from any other food source, even yogurt. Most of the yogurt products have 1 or 4 strains at the most, and your body actually needs different strains for different kinds of things. And simply adding that to your diet will help it become more efficient, helps you absorb water, minerals, trace elements, vitamins. You can eat less food. You push out the bad bacteria. your intestines function better. It's amazing what just adding that to your diet can do. So it helps the whole inflammatory process. It helps the gut to function better. Those 5 things, if everybody could do that, they would have a different life.
Wow. And so you can go into a natural food store like Hunger Mountain Co-op or Sweet Pea, and you can say, give me some acidophilus, and they'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And what I do is I provide people with a list, and they can take it to the store, and it's got the brand names, and they can, most of the people around are stocked up now. So.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yep.
Amazing. Now, you brought in some books.
Yeah.
And so maybe we should, I'm assuming these are books that you might recommend people.
Yeah, these are some things that help me out. There's a really great book called Stopping Inflammation by Nancy Appleton. Came out a few years ago, and she really looks at the whole process of inflammation. It was kind of a landmark book for me that helped to look at the whole notion of inflammation and how it's changing our understanding of nutrition and the disease process.
Because interesting. Because when I think of inflammation, I think you've got an inflammation and you take care of it, and then you don't have it anymore.
Right.
But it sounds like it's something that's
always brewing
to a certain degree. And
it's the temperature control. It's the thermostat, if you will, of the body. And so the markers of inflammation are traditionally, when we look at somebody, we'll say, well, you got a pustule on your arm. It's red. It's pussy. It's hot. That's sort of going on at a low simmer view in the total body. So there's actually hormones that are part of this. There are chemicals that increase this in the body, and it's those substances that actually cause the damage to the tissues. Mm-hmm. So the body's constantly having to fight against this. And inflammation is good in one sense because it helps the body to bring in the stuff it needs to repair itself. But when it's turned up, and a classic example would be arthritis. Mm-hmm. It's actually damaging the joints. But there's also inflammation that's causing damage that's leading to heart disease and diabetes and cancer and Alzheimer's disease. So all of these can be related to that process.
Great.
There's another great book called Natural Detoxification by Jacqueline Crone, a practical encyclopedia of how to cleanse the body of these toxins. And she's got formulas for different things you can use in the springtime to help the body to cleanse, or the liver.
Oh, like a springtime tonic.
Yep.
Oh, wow. How about that?
Another great book is called The Schwarzbein Principle by Diana Schwarzbein. It's really a wonderful way of looking at diet, exercise, and lifestyle. And the diet's very similar to the Zone diet. It's a more sensible approach than, say, the Atkins diet, I think. But it's a overview of the whole process of how to stay healthy. And that's a resource that I often look at. There's another book called Beyond Aspirin by Thomas Newmark. Looks at the COX-2 issue, and there's actually a natural COX-2 that I recommend called Zyflamend, which is put out by New Chapter. And
what's a COX-2?
I know I'm not supposed to mention products, but it's a combination of 5 herbs, and a COX-2 inhibitor is a substance, a medicinal product that there are several out there that people may be aware of that actually helps to reduce inflammation. Well, this particular product is great because it doesn't have a lot of the side effects of some of the others, and it's based on ginger and rosemary and a number of other herbs. And many of these natural anti-inflammatory products like ginger can help the body to reduce inflammation and not really cause side effects because they're part of our diet.
Huh. Wow. So were you going to tell us what that product is? Or did you say you didn't want to tell us?
Actually, it was Zyflamend.
Oh, Zyflamend.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
But ginger is a great anti-inflammatory. Another book called The Color Code, which came to me by, actually the author gave me a copy, James Joseph and Dan Nadeau, wrote a book on the importance of the colored vegetables and fruits. So the purples and the blues and the reds, and how they can benefits they have. They're all antioxidants, but they also have additional benefits to the eye and other organs. So making sure that those are part of our health. And goji juice, goji berries, is another one.
Yeah, I heard about those, huh?
So those are out there. And I think the more we can expose ourselves to the natural forms of these things and find them in our supermarkets, the more we demand those things, they're going to be on the shelves.
Right.
I'm really surprised how well some of the supermarkets have gone the route of looking at natural foods, and that's really helping a lot of people stay healthier.
Yep.
So if we can buy stuff in the supermarket in their natural form, that's great.
Yep.
But
Yep.
the supplements are there to, take over in the meantime.
Right. It's funny because I've talked to my mom about, natural food, organic food. And I'm like, think about like I mean, it's weird that we have to label things natural.
Mm.
It seems more like we should label things that aren't natural. Something like, food grown with poison.
Right. Right. I know everything is natural because it grows in the earth.
Right.
But I think that if we pay attention to what's in them in addition to what we're supposed to be getting as food, that's what the difference is.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is there is a different product when you grow something one way versus another, like the wild versus the caged animal. There is a difference.
Right.
And I think people are demanding. And the reason this is changing is people are demanding. They want something better.
Right.
And if we can do that and take less drugs to stay healthy, I think we'll be better off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you've got one last book there.
The last one is called Foods That Harm, Foods That Heal. It's been out for a while. It's actually put out by Reader's Digest, and it's a great resource for, okay, I want to get more vitamin C, or I want to get more iron. What kinds of foods do I need to eat that kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. And so that's a great resource.
Wow. Well, Tim, this has been incredibly informative today. I just really want to thank you. Wow, that was a lot of information. I wish I was taking notes, but I'm going to listen in not this Saturday, but next Saturday at 8 o'clock and be able to hear it again.
Well,
or people can tune in or go to www.dinnerhour.org and download the show from there and hear it again, because this was a jam-packed hour.
Well, this is only the beginning, so.
Wow. Okay. So you'll come back again?
Absolutely.
We'll do like an advanced class. Okay.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tim. It's about getting around 6 o'clock here, and coming up next is Democracy Now! That's going to be followed by Free Speech Radio News, and then we've got Currently Nameless and Unknown with Tim Seneff coming in at 7:30, and then Roots of the Tiger with Jason Lerner at 9 o'clock. So I guess we're about ready to tune into Democracy Now! Thanks again, Tim, for coming in.
You're welcome.
This was
Stay
great.
healthy.
Yes, absolutely.
Eat right.
Yes, for the new year. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, everyone.
WMRW LP Warren, 95.1 FM, the voice of the valley.
The following program presents the opinions of its participants and producers and does not necessarily reflect an official opinion of WMRW LP or its license holder, Roots Work.